Something about his attitude, his characteristics that made John the Baptist a very popular person. And I think the same thing is true with Jesus. You know, there was something, you know, the Bible tells us that Jesus was hard to look at. That he was not pleasant to look at. The Bible tells us that.
Not ugly, but it wasn't. So there was nothing.
Nothing special about him. Yeah, there was nothing that really made him stand out. But yet he stood out. And you know, and one thing about it, I'm not going to be really gung-ho about following somebody that's going to condemn me all the time, tell me I'm lost, tell me I'm going to hell. I don't want to be around people like that. I want to be around people who are going to be positive with me, who's going to make me feel good about myself. And there was something about Jesus that did that. The multitudes followed him because there was something about them that they actually liked.
Well, he didn't condemn them. He told them what was wrong, but he didn't.
Right. He didn't.
Condemn them right on the spot.
And that's why I've always said condemning never saves a soul. It never does. It does not work. Anyway.
He's talking about John the Baptist, but his family. Just think about that. The things that took place while, you know, just him coming into the world and what you think about it.
Right. Absolutely. And you can't help but wonder, you know, knowing a little bit about this family, what made him turn out the way he did? Wild locust and honey and dressing in camel's hair. You know, what
He
made him
came
do that?
from a elite family?
He came from a very nice family. Well, it was Mother Mary's sister
Okay,
or aunt.
Cousin.
Aunt, what-
So-
Cousins,
Aunt.
they were cousins.
Yeah.
Cousins. Okay. Yeah. So they were not a downcast family at all. You know. So who knows? And it was probably God's will that he turned out that way so that people would see what he really was.
Well, one of the things the Bible talks about is that he was filled with the Holy Spirit even in his
Right.
mother's womb.
And that's a feeling right there. It should be. But anyway, what James is saying here, the royal law means that you have a good relationship with people, and you have a good relationship with God. That's what this is talking about. And it is probably one of the most fundamental laws ever given to us by God. Because what was the first and greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And what was the second? Love your neighbor as yourself. And that comes from Matthew 22, verse 37 to 40. And then the last thing it says in verse 40, on these two commandments hang the law and the prophets. So everything
He's based on.
about Christianity comes from this right here. Love God, love one another. So it's a religion filled with relationships. Questions on that? All right. Another thing is something that Paul said. Let's look at Romans 13, verses 8 through 10. And Paul is basically talking about how we have a relationship with one another. Okay? Romans 13, beginning with verse 8. Owe no one anything except to love one another. Well, he just said the same thing James just said, right? Which is the same thing Jesus had just said. For he who loves another has fulfilled the law. Well, again, that goes back to what Jesus has said. That's the law and the prophets. Okay? All right, move on. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not murder. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. If there is any other commandment, they're all summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Because if you love your neighbor, there will be no stealing, there will be no murder, there will be no adultery, there will be no lying, which is what false witness is. None of that is going to take place because you have love and respect for that person. And again, that's what, and the last thing he says in verse 10, love does no harm to the neighbor. Therefore, love is a fulfillment of the law. Everything is based on that. And that's what makes the law of God royal.
Will you say those verses again?
Or,
Which verse was, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Romans 13, 8 through 10.
Thank you.
Okay? Now James is going to say something in verse 10 that can kind of be rattling us a little bit. If we break one law, we have become guilty of all. What message is he trying to get across to us?
No little sin and big sin. Sin
That's
is
it.
a sin.
There's no little sin, there's no big sin. There's no big lie, there's no white lie.
You can't pick and choose what scriptures you want to obey.
Okay, it says that in an indirect way, it says that as well. James 2, verse 10. For whoever shall keep the whole law and yet stumble in one point, he is guilty of all. And that don't mean that if you go out and steal something, it's the same as if you killed it. We know there's a difference in the physicality of that. But what this is saying is you broke God's law. Whichever one you do, you have broken God's law. And the recompense is the same if you break God's law. I think that's what this verse is saying. In verse 11, he goes on to explain it, and we're going to get more into this as we get farther into this particular lesson. He who said do not commit adultery also said do not murder. Now, if you do not commit adultery, but you do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. In other words, it don't matter which one you do. If you do one of them, you broke the law. You know, that's just like if you race down the street at 90 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, what have you done? You broke the law. You know, and that's just as bad as if you went in a convenience store at gunpoint and robbed somebody. You broke the law then too, haven't you? What have you done in both cases? You broke the law. Now, in man's law, one is not as severe as the other. But in God's law, sin is sin.
Separates us from God.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So this just tells us just how terrible sin is,
Thank goodness we're not under the old law.
really. Because no one could keep the old law to its perfection. All right, number 7. Man, I got to bring a battery and fix that clock. That's driving me crazy. It's still 12:40, 12:38.
Nap time.
Huh?
Nap time.
Nap time, okay. Y'all don't look back during the worship service, me up there preaching, look back at that clock and say, man, I wish he does. All right, number 7. How can one be guilty of all by stumbling only in one point? Well, we read verse 11.
We kind of talked about that, didn't we?
Yeah, we've already kind of talked about that. And this brings up another little word that God does not like: partiality. Do we not accept certain things and condemn certain other things, and both of them be wrong?
Well, just like we were talking about sin, you know, some people will say, well, murder is much worse than
Yeah.
lying, you know, but to God, they're all sin.
You know, you mentioned lying, and that's a big one with God, because he says all liars will find their part in the lake that burns with fire. So that's a big one with God. And I wouldn't think lying to be near as bad as murder or adultery or thievery.
Isn't that one of the abominations over
It
in
is.
Proverbs, I think?
It is one of the 7 abominations, yeah.
Well, I think too, sometimes we want to, not accept it in some of our family members where we would in somebody else.
Well, I've got that before. I've got that. But, you know, and the strange thing about it, and I had this happen. A member came to me and just really was irritable, just mad, because someone in the church had committed a particular sin. And we need to withdraw from them. You know, we need to begin that process and just get them out of here. Well, about 3 weeks later, their child done the very same thing. Oh, but that's different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he didn't mean to do that. You know, and what we've condoned what he did, but we've condemned what the other person did. You know, God condemned them both. because they both committed the same sin. So we show that partiality, don't we? And naturally, you're gonna be more lenient with your own family than you will somebody across the street. That's human nature. That's why God says God shows no partiality. Everyone is treated the same.
And that's the way it'll be when we come and stand before him, walk that narrow. Your sin was,
Yeah.
you showed partiality, and I did not.
And that is,
And
that alone in
that
itself is a sin.
That is
Yeah.
a sin, and you're not gonna make it to heaven for that attitude, you know? I mean, God is gonna be very strict.
Right. And the great thing about that, though, is the law we're under now can set us free from all that. Under the old law, they had no choice. They were under that, and they couldn't get out from under it. Colossians 2, verse 20 tells us that. Therefore, if you died with Christ from the basic principles of the world, why, as though in the world you do not subject yourself to regulations, do not touch, do not taste, do not handle, which all concern things which perish with using, according to the commandments and the doctrines of men. So we have actually been set free from those restrictions. Not saying that we can do these things now. We can't say, well, I'm a Christian now, I can steal, and I can kill, and I can do adultery, I can do anything I want to because God has set me free. And you know, a lot of people look at Christianity that way.
That's right.
Because and you know, that comes to the teachings, the two teachings, that the once saved, always saved, that, you know, I can't be lost now regardless of what I do. The election where God has chosen me there because God has chosen me, I can't get out, I can live like I want to live and all that. We need to do a study, I think, maybe on that. Yes, ma'am.
Does that come from, you know, where Jesus said, if I have you in my hand, nothing can snatch you out?
Yeah, basically it does. But you know what Jesus is saying there? I will protect you, and I will care for you, and Satan can't take you away from me. But what that verse does not say is that you can jump out of Jesus' hand. You can leave Jesus' care. It's every person's choice. No, Satan can't make you do anything. He couldn't make Eve eat the fruit. But he tempted her to make the decision to eat the fruit. And that every time and we've all sinned, and every time we do it, we did it because that's what we wanted to do.
Well, you know, people do use those verses to try to justify, but, you know, why does the Bible teach about living fruit of the Spirit, living certain ways? Because if it didn't matter, why would it put it in there? You know, it clearly matters because the Bible does talk about living godly lives. And once you become a Christian, that didn't matter. Why would it
Right.
be there for us?
Well, and it wouldn't matter. If once you become a Christian, you're saved and always saved, why even bother coming here today? What good is he going to do you? What are you going to profit more from it? You're not. If that is true, but it's not true. You know, if it was true, why would Paul buffet himself daily so he would not fall from grace? Why would he do that if he was saved forever? You know, so we know that can't be right. Yes, the law sets us free. The new law sets us free. But we have to want it, and we must want to live in that free state, and that means stay away from the old state, is what that's actually saying. What else? Steve, what time is it?
9:57.
Okay. 9:57. 9:57? We're late.
We started at 9:30.
Okay, never mind.
It's a new time that's,
We laughing with you, not at you. Promise you.
You know, I haven't got over my hour yet. Last week. Okay.
I
You
get
got 3
confused
minutes,
on
I think,
Sunday
right?
evenings
Yeah, I said
sometimes.
in my
Am I
mind, I've
supposed to
got
be
3
there at
minutes. I
7 or
got actually
6?
18. That's
Yes.
right. All right, well, let's, now, another thing this verse is telling us, sometimes we put our own restrictions on God's law, don't we? Sometimes we make rules where there are not rules. You know, the Jews tried to do this with the Gentiles when they became Christians. They wanted the Gentiles, because now circumcision was nothing anymore. The Jews wanted it to still be a factor, so they demanded that the Gentiles be circumcised, which none of them were. And of course, it was a great turmoil in the early days of the church. In fact, what we know is the council, the Jerusalem Council, that's what that dealt with. And Peter had to make it clear, God has accepted the Gentile just as he has accepted the Jew. And they were wanting to make that restriction. For them to be accepted, they had to take one more step to be a Christian than the Jews did. And of course, we know that's not true. There is only one way to be a Christian, there's only one way to remain a Christian, and it's God's way. Do we put restrictions on religion today? Do we do that? I guess we do, don't we? Yeah. I mean, look at the multitude of churches that are out there, and that's what they've done. They have changed the law, is what they have done. And even within the church, we make laws where there are not laws.
But there was a transition taking place with those people, in that they felt like they were obeying the old covenant, but they were given a new covenant under Christ.
Right.
So they were making that transition there.
Right.
Well, and didn't Paul kind of use that, like, in his missionary journeys? Like, when Timothy, didn't he have Timothy circumcised just because if they were going to the, even though it wasn't necessary, obviously, and they knew that, they were just trying to make it where the Jews would accept them more.
It was an acceptance move, yeah. And another thing, Paul at one time made the statement, I am all things to all people. Paul would also keep the Nazirite vow. Not because he had to, but because it was a way to get his foot in a door to teach the gospel.
Eating meat
he did
sacrificed
what
to
now?
idols, wasn't that another one?
I don't remember the sacrifice to idol thing.
The
I know
meat that was sacrificed to
Pardon?
idols. Wasn't that one of the questions, meat that was sacrificed to
Yeah,
idols?
he did talk about that, and he just made it clear, it don't matter.
Yeah.
The meat is meat,
Well, he
Now, he did say if it's going to offend the Christian, he
To
wants to.
stumble somebody,
Yeah.
make somebody else stumble,
If it's gonna
yeah.
make someone else stumble as a Christian, he won't do it, But when you stop and think about that, and I think what he meant by that was, I won't do it in front of them,
In and of itself,
In
it's not bad, but
Right.
if it offends a brother,
He talked about the holidays, the natural holidays that the Jews followed, and even some of the holidays that the Gentiles followed. And he said, fine, they're nothing. It don't matter. Because it's nothing to God whether you hold these religions or not, or these religious beliefs or not. Paul went into the temple on the Sabbath, and I'm sure he didn't create a commotion when they went through their Sabbath worship. But he went in there for the purpose of getting his foot in the door so that he could teach them while he was in there.
teaching the truth.
And he did it in a way not to offend. He did it in a way where they would listen. Because if you offend somebody, they're not going to listen to a word you have to say. So they just simply knew, hey, he knew how to do that. What else? But again, we make rules where there are no rules sometimes, and that's not good. And all right, number 9. This is the last one I have for this lesson. Define mercy. This comes from James 2 verse 13. For judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. I've heard this statement so many times. When I stand before God, I want mercy and not justice. Now, when we go to court here in our country, if we are at odds with someone over a certain thing, what are we looking for? Justice. We want them to get their just rewards, and we want to get justice from the court.
And mercy does not necessarily go along with that. It's not like.
No, it don't. You've heard the phrase, I throw myself at the mercy of the court. That usually don't work, does it? Court's not going to give you mercy. They're going to follow what the law has to say. Okay? And that's kind of what James is saying here. Judgment is not going to have any mercy for those who don't show mercy. In other words, if you're not someone who can be a merciful person, you're not going to receive mercy. That goes back to the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth law under the Old Testament. We like to look at that like, well, we'll give them what they deserve. That's the eye for an eye. That isn't even what the eye for an eye law is saying. The eye for an eye law is simply saying that if you deal with a person a certain way, you will be dealt with in the same way. That's all that's saying. It's not a law of revenge. It's a law of justice. And judgment will take place for those who show no mercy. That's what James is saying here in verse 13. Now, the Greek word for mercy is ilios. It's the Strong's number 1656. And here is its definition. Kindness, or goodwill toward the miserable and the afflicted, joined with a desire to help. So there's more to mercy than just a feeling, isn't it? There has to be some action involved if mercy is involved. Is a part of it. If I'm going to show mercy to someone who is in need, what am I going to do? I'm going to give them what they need. That's what mercy is saying. God was merciful toward us, but it was more than him just saying, I'm going to be merciful. He showed his mercy, didn't he? Through sending his son. It's just like husbands and wives. You can tell each other all day long, I love you, I love you, I love you. But if you never do anything to show that love, what have you done? You've done nothing. Love is not just a word, it is an action word. Mercy is not just a word, it is an action word. We show mercy by what we do, not by what we say.
So if we get into trouble, we should say, show me mercy.
I think show me mercy is a better statement than give me mercy. Yeah. Because if you're going to receive mercy, it's going to be in the form of something and not just words.
If they're merciful, yeah.
If they're merciful, right, if they're merciful. Comments on that? All right. Next week, we will move into lesson 5, which is on faith, the living faith. And we'll talk about faith in general. We'll talk about our faith in Christ. We'll talk about the evidence of our faith, and we'll talk about the source of our faith.
You got some more.
I still got 10 minutes. Man, we got to fix that
You got
clock
9
up there.
minutes.
Got to fix that clock. All right, well, let's just go into it.
Yeah.
We'll have time to read the passage. James chapter 2.
You got up on the wrong side of bed this morning.
It's that clock's not helping him out any.
Yeah, I probably did get on the wrong side of the bed. James chapter 2. See, I don't carry a watch. I don't wear a watch. So, and I don't bring my phone to church because it might go off. All right. James 2, beginning with verse 14. And this lesson will carry us through verse 26. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith, I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe there is one God. You do well. Even the demons believe and tremble. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? Do you see that faith was working together with his works, and by works faith was made perfect? And the scripture was fulfilled which says, Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And he was called the friend of God. You see, then that a man is justified by works and not by faith only. Likewise, was not Rahab the harlot also justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way? For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. Now, James wrote every bit of that, and we know that works don't save. Scriptures tell us works don't save. Is this a contradiction? Can't be, can it? No. What James is telling us is that faith will put you to work. Faith will make you do something because of your faith. You know, it's like when you get in a car in the morning to go somewhere, you have faith that that car is going to start, don't you? So are you just going to sit there and wait for the car to start? What do you have to do?
Turn that ignition.
You have to turn the key, or most cars now you push the button, same principle. You have got to do something to exercise your faith that that car is going to start. Now, if you push that button or turn that key and that car don't start, then you've got a whole different situation altogether. But faith has got to be exercised. It can't stand alone. And I think that's what James is trying to tell us here. And that's why he said, you have faith? Show me your faith by not doing anything. Can you do that? From a spiritual standpoint, can you do that? Do you know how many people try? A vast majority of people try to show their faith by not doing anything and justify themselves in that process. These are the people James is talking to. You can't do it that way. Something has to happen for your faith to be correct. You have to do something. All right. How much time we got left now?
So,
5 minutes.
Okay. Go ahead.
so they believed, but they didn't put it into action.
Yeah, and you know, he brings this out. So you believe in God? Well, you do well. Even the devils believe and tremble. Now, and this is true. Every demon from Satan on down believes in God. They understand the power of God. They understand their faith. I mean, they're in because of the power of God. The only problem is they're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to come to God.
But that's why they left heaven.
Right, that's why they left
were
heaven to
all
begin
in
with.
heaven, even
Absolutely.
Satan himself. But he wanted to change things, do things his way, so God threw him down to the earth, and along with his friends.
And we've seen that happen a few times down here too, haven't we? Or other men have done that, they've wanted it their way. And while they're here, they may get it their way.
There's a lot of people like that.
Oh, yeah, a lot of people like that. But, you know, the fact is, I believe in God. Yeah, you know, there's a difference in saying I believe in God and I believe God. You know, there's a big difference in those two statements. That one little word makes all the difference in the world. If you believe in God, you're probably like most people on this planet, because most people on this planet believe in God of some kind. May not be Jehovah, but they'll believe in God.
I don't think that's going to help them out very much.
Pardon?
The Bible kind of indicates that doesn't help them out very much.
That doesn't help them at all. But if you say, I believe God, now if you believe something, what does that mean to you? It's important to you. It's important enough to you that you're going to act on it. Okay? There's the difference of believing and believing in.
Trust.
All right. Let's look very quickly at number one. Define faith. Well, we've kind of done that. It comes from the Greek word pistis, the Greek word faith, and it's the only word faith you'll find in the New Testament. Strong's number 4102. This is Mr. Webster's definition of faith: an allegiance to duty or a person, loyalty, belief and trust in and loyalty to God, belief in the traditional doctrines of religion, firm belief in something for which there is no proof, complete trust. So that's a big umbrella word here that involves all of the above. I like the fact that he used the word loyalty. If you have faith in God, you are going to be loyal to God. In fact, that was one of the definitions, belief and trust and loyal to God.
And doesn't the Bible say faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen?
Right.
So
And
that's
I
what I
like,
go by.
and that's right. You know, we may not have physical evidence of something, but we know it to be true. Do we all believe in George Washington? Do we know he existed?
Got a
His
picture
picture's
of
on the
him?
dollar bill.
Yeah,
I saw his statue in Washington, D.C.
I'm not sure it's still up, but,
Pardon?
I'm not sure if it's still up, but
It may
anyway.
not be up now. In fact, it was under a scaffolding when we were there. They were doing some repair work on it when we were there. We'll stop here. I have more to say about number one, so we will begin at this point next week. Thank you.
Fair. I'll give you some more time on stuff like that trust issue, like Trump was looking for our Comey when his first administration.
He was looking for what?
Trust and loyalty. Trump was out of Comey. You know what I'm talking about? That FBI director, did it wrong.
Oh, okay.
Jesus was about
Okay. I was kind of surprised when you said. Okay.
What you got for me this morning, Mr. Chairman?